It's a new day on Deep Space Nine, and we have palpable proof that miracles exist. Overworked dog's body Miles O'Brien is going on holiday for a week, once he's finished making sure nobody does anything to kaboom the station while he's gone. He bumps into an old acquaintance on the way, and as it's been a while since we dragged out the wheel, why don't we slap a name on the lad? Our newcomer will be known to us as... Pitter Chips, provided by Lieutenant Sinnock the Hodgehag. Pitter Chips here worked with O'Brien on a previous posting, but says he left Starfleet after the Setlick 3 massacre. Setlick 3, you will recall, is a bit of unpleasantness from when we were still having a ding-dong with the Cardigans, and the one O'Brien references regularly. Pitter settled down on a colony afterwards, and one that's now on the unpleasant side of the demilitarized zone, but he minds stuff the Cardigans want and is left alone as a result. They arrange to meet up when the two are both on the station together next, and O'Brien leaves. Things are not as they seem, though, and Pitter Chips pops into a dark room and plays with a gizmo, one that has recorded the conversation they just had about serving together. Maybe he just wants a memento of his old friend, so let's catch up to O'Brien. He and Keiko have left Molly with another family for a week to have some time to themselves, and are flying along quite happily. Well, mostly. O'Brien couldn't resist bringing a few technical manuals along to read, and Keiko doesn't approve, but he is who he is, and it gives him a reason to make it up to her. Not for long, though, as we've got a ship incoming. It's a Cardigan vessel, and they're blocking calls back home. We're contacted by the guy in charge, and you might remember Gullavec here from a certain meeting on a colony in the demilitarized zone. He's no less unpleasant here and demands to teleport over and search the ship, despite being outside of Cardigan territory. They have bigger guns, though, so O'Brien complies, and is immediately arrested for unspecified crimes. They refuse to tell him what, and he refuses to go with them, so they just poop yellow at him and teleport away, leaving Keiko and another lad behind. We're on Cardassia according to the establishing shot, and O'Brien's still not been told what he's supposed to have done. He's not being terribly cooperative in return, so his guards opt for a bit of the old violence before processing him. This involves nudity, scanning, a hair sample, and a gift for the Tooth Fairy. He's also been drugged. The damage to his face meets with disapproval from a woman who arrives after the job's been done, as the plan was to have him unharmed. She introduces herself as Mokbar and says she's Chief Archon, presumably a sort of senior judge from the sounds of things. He's told he's been given a lawyer, but that now is not the time to learn what he's accused of. While this is going on, Keiko's been returned to DS9 and Sisko informed of what's happened to O'Brien. Starfleet's redirecting ships to the area as a show of force, which is a damn sight more than they did for murdered civilians, but O'Brien's one of their own, so he actually matters to them. Keiko's under no illusions about what's happening to him right now, as O'Brien's told her stories about how the Cardigans treat prisoners. Sisko's saved from his futile attempts to calm her by an incoming call. It's Mokbar, and after Sisko threatens her a bit, she tells them O'Brien's trial will begin in 2 days. That's when they'll announce his crime and show how they came to the guilty verdict he received before the trial began. It's more efficient that way, as is having already scheduled his execution for the following week. Sisko can't attend either of these events as they're only open to a spouse and a legal advisor. The good news is that Odo is a legal advisor, the status having been given to him by Gul Dukat back when he was in charge of station security during the occupation. As Odo and Keiko leave to travel to Cardassia, Sisko orders a check of everything O'Brien did recently to try and find a connection. Kira pointing out O'Brien's dislike of Cardigans and the subsequent possibility that he actually has done whatever they're going to accuse him of is something we'll have to deal with along the way. Back on Cardassia, in the spikiest building they have, O'Brien is meeting his court-appointed lawyer named Kovat. He's not a defense lawyer in the strictest sense because such things are unnecessary in a system where guilt is determined before trial. Kovat's role is far more important. He's here to make O'Brien understand the importance of confession, not just for his own peace of mind, but to reassure the public that their justice system is infallible. He's never won a case, of course, because that would indicate a fault in the system. Every loss is proof of their judicial superiority, and in the end, isn't that the real victory? Back on Deep Space Nine, we have a problem. There are a lot of boxes that should contain fireworks, but are instead full of scrap. Quark would be the normal suspect for thieving, but Dax thinks the security sensors in here would have detected anything low-tech. In fact, she thinks it could only have been done by an expert switching the content simultaneously via teleporter. You know, that thing O'Brien used to do for a living on the Enterprise. Couple that with a voice log of O'Brien coming in here just before he left, and that's not a good look. Sisko wants everything checked, including whether that voice was actually O'Brien's, but this is uncomfortably close to making sense based on a recent report of some firework launchers being stolen by the Marquis elsewhere. O'Brien's vacation could even have been a cover for delivering them. On the plus side, we do now have a potential lead. Regardless of how these fireworks were nicked, there's got to be someone they were being delivered to. Back to Cardassia we go, and Odo's meeting with O'Brien. He's still not been told his crime, and Odo asks him if he's had any contact with the Marquis before telling him about the missing fireworks. He denies being involved and going anywhere near that storage area before he left, but mentions that the Cardigans who picked him up apparently found something on his megashuttle. Either he's lying or he's being expertly framed. The answer, it seems, is being framed. Dax has done a science to the voice log and determined it's a fake. More accurately, it's a composite of his real voice spliced together. Somebody recording him could have done it. We've also identified everybody from the demilitarized zone who was here at the same time, and discovered some shopkeepers remember our boy Pitter Chips talking to O'Brien on the day the fireworks went missing. Time for a little chat. Time also for O'Brien's court appearance and its associated broadcast to the public. He's offered the chance to confess, and Keiko the opportunity to cleanse herself of her husband's shame by testifying against him. Both are declined. Odo butts in and asks to confer with Kovat, O'Brien's lawyer, and news of fresh evidence is not well received by him. O'Brien's already guilty, we wouldn't be in court if he wasn't. Faffing about with things like evidence risks bollocksing up the whole system. As Kovat won't do anything, Odo tries bringing the evidence before Makbar, the judge. He also points out the crime of which O'Brien is accused would have occurred on a Bajoran station, and thus none of their bloody business. Kovat has the good sense to see how this will reflect on him, and tries to resign the case, a request that's declined. Mokbar has a bit of a rant about how miraculous new evidence from the Federation was to be expected, which is why Cardigan courts don't allow such utter nonsense. She also ignores the jurisdiction argument completely and moves on to calling witnesses so they can all get back to proving why O'Brien is guilty. Sisko and Kira, on the other hand, are trying to do the very opposite. We've located Pitter Chips from the start of the show and are having a lovely chat with him. It's a bit one-sided, as he has nothing to say beyond confirming he spoke to O'Brien and telling us he did nothing wrong. We stick him in a holding cell while we try to find out more. The information we get comes from an unexpected source. In fact, it comes from an unknown source. The lights in the infirmary don't work when Bashir enters, so he doesn't see the person who tells him to not turn around. They're here to deliver a message. Pitter Chips is not a member of the Marquis, the unknown visitor claiming to speak on their behalf. Bashir has more questions, but he's just wasting air. The visitor has already gone. Gul Avec, he of the previous Marquis unpleasantness, is giving evidence to the court. Well, I say evidence, but it's more him claiming O'Brien's a wrong'un, and the court taking his word for it. When Odo tries to question which sources Gul Avec used to identify both the theft of the fireworks and how they'd be on O'Brien's shuttle, he says it's a secret, and the judge thinks that's a fair answer. What's the point in having secret sources if you're expected to reveal them? That's just silly. Mokbar's getting pissed off with how long this is taking, so that's all the questioning we get. She tells Kovat to hurry things along, and we go back to proving O'Brien's guilt. Back on the station we have some questions for Pitter Chips. He left Starfleet some 8 years back, and in a funny set of coincidences, that's also when he cut off contact with his parents and left his wife. And that's another funny thing too. He didn't leave Starfleet. He was discharged based on his performance. Sisko thinks all these coincidences are worth giving him a checkup. Sounds like PTSD to me, but we'll assume Sisko has his reasons for thinking otherwise. Back to Cardassia we go for the conclusion of the court case. O'Brien is told there's no option but to testify, which is curious when Mokbar wanted to hurry things along, but let's ignore that for now. Kovat tries to find some trauma in his past that might explain him becoming the criminal he is today, and is basically told to balls by O'Brien. Mokbar takes over and instead moves on to the war, asking how many Cardigans he killed. She refers to this as past criminal activity and suggests it must have been many for him to not know the exact number. She thinks that this might explain his current attitude towards Cardigans, having spoken out previously about them being untrustworthy. O'Brien admits that's something he has previously said, though has the good sense to not add that it's true. That's enough for his lawyer, and Covart wants to pack things in while they're going badly for him. O'Brien again repeats that he's not guilty and that this whole thing is a farce, so Covart tries to distance himself from his client. Mokbar's in a good mood by this point and allows him to do so. That good mood is immediately ruined. Sisko enters the courtroom and he's brought pita chips with him. Mokbar looks very surprised indeed at seeing them, and it's not Sisko she focuses on. This might explain why, after telling the audience watching that O'Brien's guilt has been proven, she says that he'll be set free. You know, because he's learned his lesson, and as a symbol of cooperation, and definitely not because there's something very dodgy going on and she's realised the whole thing's been rumbled. We're on our way back to DS9 and explaining things to O'Brien. Bashir found out why Pita Chips had a very sudden change of personality 8 years back, because he's not Pita Chips. The guy O'Brien met back on the station was actually a Cardigan surgically altered to take his place. The original was captured at Setlik 3 and didn't survive the experience. He'd been working undercover ever since. Getting booted out of Starfleet probably didn't go down too well with his superiors, but implicating a serving officer in Marquis activity would have been quite the comeback. It would have let the Cardigans claim the Marquis were working with Starfleet all along, and argue that all Federation colonies on their side of the border should be removed. Mokbar must have known about all this and did her best to save face, rather than risk a public embarrassment. All's well that ends well then, and Sisko's even arranged to extend their holiday, so we'll leave the O'Briens to try and salvage something from this whole fiasco, until the next adventure. Once again, the Cardigan authorities pull some underhanded shit, and once again the Federation consider simply stopping it to be a sufficient response. O'Brien gets kidnapped, tortured, resulting in grievous bodily harm, and subjected to a public show trial for propaganda purposes. We not only do nothing as a response, but in fact return one of their agents to them. Looking at it pragmatically, what essentially amounts to an exchange of hostages is probably the swiftest way to resolve the problem. The issue is that it only solves this problem, and does nothing to deter the next. I realise all of this is necessary, of course. Deterring your main antagonist from being an antagonist probably isn't going to make for good TV. An episode where O'Brien actually got to go on holiday because the Cardigan Central Command were worried about the repercussions of kidnapping him isn't much of a story. A level of suspended disbelief is necessary then for the whole thing to work, but that doesn't stop the lack of action being annoying. While I'm in whining mode, let's complain about the abruptly swift ending too, the most egregious element of which is checking Pita Chips over because reasons. This is the first example we have of Cardigans placing cosmetically altered sleeper agents, so that wasn't the cause. There's no logical link between this guy is acting dodgy and we need to give him a physical, the check only really happening because the plot needed it to. The bugger of it is, we had an option here. We know he was booted out of Starfleet shortly after Setlik 3. A line in there about him refusing to undergo a medical when he returned, and that being part of the reason he was discharged, would have given us both a reason to look, and Bashir more to do in the episode. Now that I've got all of the negativity out of my system, let's have a look at the many, many positives. We've got the nods to previous stuff in this one for a start. The Marquis are brought up again, still on the lookout for toys, and Gulavec being present for events makes sense given his previous involvement. We've also got a great performance from Colm Meaney. His mixture of annoyance and frustration might be part of why O'Brien so regularly got shat on. The main star, though, for me at least, is the Cardigan justice system itself. The idea that individual justice runs secondary to a greater cause, that of maintaining order, and those involved playing it as the most natural thing in the world. Fritz Weaver, who plays Covart in this, does the most work here. His grandfatherly way of presenting things that are anathema to our idea of justice makes it almost seem like compassion. The warm delivery of reasons why this is best for everyone, each attempt to strip away your freedom couched in such a way that it sounds like he's trying to help you. You want to like this guy who's trying to make you confess. You could even argue that it is compassion of a sort. Threatening those convicted of crimes into confession would be quicker, so instead having a friendly face try to reason with you might be considered generous. That's part of the central concept, though, isn't it? Convicting people isn't enough. The true victory of the system is making them agree that they were right to be convicted, even if they had nothing to do with it. Big Brother only disposes of people once they've been taught to love him. The whole thing is so deliciously insidious. I've said before on here that I love a good bastard. It's not really surprising then that the justice system in this would entertain me. It's all so wrong, so fundamentally corrupt, but presented in such a way that you're drawn to it. That it's shown as such shouldn't really be surprising either. Star Trek has labelled the Cardigans as people for whom truth is a variable, the literal bastards of the Alpha Quadrant, so presenting the system under which they operate as a bastard too is the logical conclusion. End of episode.
I got word back from Quark about the defensive capabilities of the station. He said they've got poopers, farters, and a few hundred fireworks.
What the fuck is that supposed to mean?
No idea, but he sounded confident, so we're putting it in the report.
You know what, I don't care. This was supposed to be a simple job and I've had a right time trying to get Cisco's command codes. Bugger threatened to put me in the box, whatever that is.
Forget it then. We'll have to just send what we've got now and hope it's enough.
Any word from Dominion Publishing on when this brochure's going to be available?
Nothing definite, but they told me we should expect to see something special from them any day now.
Sounds promising. I hope we get proper credit for all the things we told them. I want everyone to know how much of this was down to us. Woof.